The second goal, which many of these mechanics seems to address, is that somehow make people sure that that part is part of the play, no? That by veiling, you are not interrupting or breaking the game. No? So don't be afraid to push this button. Don't be afraid to use this, because it is part of the game itself. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Exactly. People talk about peer pressure, no? The desire, the wish to counter the peer pressure and so on. So it seems that there is a growing need to mask or code the communication about this kind of communication, so communication about the content we want to line or veil, in a way, in such a way that somehow it's I don't know, it's coded, it's masked, no, is camouflaged through the rest of the system, which is something I find fascinating, because it's a need I don't have on myself. It's something I could understand, at least at a certain level, for something like LARP, no? For a live action role play where everything is designed to be in character 100% of the time. So if you want to say, I'm not okay with this, you need some trick to do it while staying in character. But for games like D&D or D&D likes, no, which are the games I usually play.
Right. Whatever this
is. You're always out of character. No, you're talking about hit point initiative. So why?
There's no meaning to the word meta at all. But I agree with you. So I think that may be a distinction, though, because inside role-playing culture, we do create an artificial distinction between in and out of character, which is extremely crude and inaccurate. So that's one thing. There's also something else. Remember how I talked about how if the medium is listening, it's not, the imagination is not the medium? There's another thing that's not the medium, and I think that's important here. That the medium is not the record of what has been spoken. The medium was what was listened to and reincorporated. So it's not just like a radio theater event. And if you think it's a radio theater event, then you need constant editing. And I think that that's where you find you find the context of somebody who feels as though they are the editor of everything that gets spoken at all times. It's not going to be official until they repeat it or they encourage it, and that it's probably they find it disturbing when you speak without being prompted, because they were managing, you can speak when I have set up the whole frame of what you can speak into. And so they if you think the medium is radio theater, then you're going to feel this fear that something could be said at any moment that isn't, their final cut, isn't good. It'll slip under, your final cut, position that you have elected yourself into, and that's, that will be trouble. Anything could be said. That's bad. They're listening out there, right? The world is listening. This is going out live. So I think that that in that context, you will get people who, again, if that's the medium that they're dealing with, then they're right. It is at risk because other people, God help us all, will talk. So therefore, we should recognize that presumptions of the kind I was talking about, that that first of all, that we are sitting among, psychopaths, we are sitting among bullies, we are sitting among, damaging humans. And then second, if we're doing this radio theater, then yes, that is a fragile medium. instantly ruined by somebody saying anything that, I have deemed is not right for it. And so if you're going in with any of these kinds of assumptions, then I can't help you. I mean, you're already sitting in dangerous and fragile territory. And of course, you're going to be in a state of constant anxiety that this has to be corrected, and bolstered and shielded. Whereas if you're talking about the kind of medium I'm talking about, then the risks are real, but we're not in that kind of a fragile state that they're in. The risks are different and they are real, and we need things to deal with. We need methods. But I want to go back to the point that you started with, because I've wandered away from it. The idea was, do we need something like the X card on the table, because then it puts everybody on their best behavior? They know that we're taking this seriously. I'm not sure it does. I'm not sure that's what did it. And I agree with you, by the way, in your observation, because I have asked that a couple of times, which is, can somebody tell me about, somebody actually using the X card in play? And the answer is, that's funny. No. And I become very suspicious that, well, all that play at all those tables is great and better because it was sitting there. I'm not so sure I don't really buy that. If the people were capable of functioning in that fashion, first of all, let's clarify a couple of things. One, having that sitting there doesn't mean it's going to be used or used appropriately. Okay, let's just get that in place right there. If there is an appropriate use of such a crude thing. But if and to extend that, if the text says, here are the safety tools, so this is a safer game, dude, anybody can say it. Anybody can say it. I don't trust anybody, ipso facto. I trust people because I do things with them and we see how it goes. So I don't give credit to, a line in a text or to a piece of paper. I give credit to our ability to get along and enjoy what we're doing, and to bring aesthetic and other preferences and needs into it. And so the only way to find out if people are capable of that is to actually play with them, and to continue to play with the ones that do, which, as it happens, is quite a lot of people, especially people new to role playing who need very little training about this, and if any. In fact, they should be training us. So anyway, those are some of my thoughts about that topic. But I don't know if you had a specific question about that or just wanted a response to it.
Very interesting. No, I just wanted to know your thoughts. So I think this was very, very, very clear, very good. Well, the third goal, or the third point that a few people have made about these tools, I think, can be somehow connected to a certain distrust of people common sense in front of managing problems. So they made the comparison with something like evacuation instructions in case of fire. No, when the problem arises, you might do the wrong thing. You might panic. So just follow the procedure. You need to have a standardized procedure so you're sure you will do the right thing.
Well, I agree about that, but then why does the standardized procedure basically have to be almost very similar to leaning across the table and striking someone in the face, which is what the X card is? I mean, I agree, known procedure is a good thing. Why don't we have a good one? So
I see.
That's
okay.
So yeah, the idea that there is some sort of some shared vocabulary or shared set of things to do is a very good one. There's a reason somebody at the tables I play at, will say line, just because it's a very clear statement and it's an understood one. And I think that's a great idea. That's exactly what I was talking about from the beginning. Let's actually have some means by which we communicate in play, maybe before play to some extent. Then we can go from there. And then, I mean, we'll see how we do. But I think that is much more generous toward the other people and willing to discover their standards than any of these other things, these distortions that have arisen. Yeah, I mean, if we have a great big sit down and talk about like all of our lines and veils beforehand, I just don't believe you. Anybody can say it. Do we have any outstanding questions that you brought? Things that we didn't address?
Just one last question, but
Sure.
just in case. Are you familiar with the so-called Luxoton technique?
I don't think so. Maybe I didn't understand you properly, but I don't think so.
I can write it down.
I think it's Luxton, Luxton.
No.
It's the thing for like PTSD or something.
Oh, okay. Wait. Is this the things like tunneling and stuff like that?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, okay. Yes, I am. Yeah, I didn't know the name.
So. Okay. No, it was one of the various pages, materials that I studied in this period, and it struck me in a peculiar way because it's the only case where I've found that as part of this mechanic, of this methodology, unlike many other safety tools, instead of expressing the need to remove something or to veil off something, they explicitly express the need to manipulate the outcome of the game itself regarding a certain aspect. So I wanted to.
The place I've seen it in a role-playing game was not about manipulating the outcome so it turned out okay. It was actually about how we manage talking to one another so that a person continues to experience the troubling content, but knows that they can get through it, or is,
okay.
And so that was the technique that I saw, and I'm specifically talking about what Stefano Berci put into Stonewall 69. Now, speaking of lunatics, Stefano says no lines, no veils. And he's talking about circumstances that are heinously dangerous, sexually challenging, frightening, and he means it. And so, and I've played Stonewall 69 with Stefano, and it goes where it's going to go. And,
okay.
And even to the point, where somebody was literally, terrified during play. So if you want to talk about, oh, look, troubled person, oh no, triggered person, whatever. Yeah, that happened. And Stefano just sat down with the guy and talked him through it. And we continued to play. And that's what he was, and he studied these PTSD techniques. I didn't know they were called the Luxton this or that. But he has looked at those and he has applied them in. He put them into the game and said, this is what you do, but don't line, don't veil. The people there didn't have lines or veils, and you don't either. So he, like I said, Stefano is not fucking around, but he put those techniques in there in order to say, yeah, it's good. There's parts that are, if you're hurting on this, now we survive it. So I actually I give him credit for his boldness, and I understand.
No, that's fascinating.
His reasons for it, I think, are sound. But handle with care, my friends. Handle with care.
No, I interviewed him actually, and it was not fully clear to me how that tunnel mechanics worked by reading the text. I asked him to to make me an example, but he wasn't able to, or at least it was not so clear to me. So if you have a better example of how it really worked, it would be intriguing for me to understand.
That's the one that I saw. That's the one that I saw, and I don't know. I don't know just what became of it. I don't know if the person in question, never wants to play Stonewall 69 again or something.
Okay.
Which is also something that Stefano can live with, and something I can live with as an author as well. I mean, I'm not in this to appeal to everybody, and I damn well know that's not the case for him. I'm speaking too much for him. You can double check on that. But he wants to reach people with this, but he wants to reach people with what he considers to be the necessary range, of content. So the point being that the content itself was not edited. That I do know from the tunneling technique that he talked about, that he has in the rules. The content of play is not edited. The tunneling refers to the focus of attention of the person who is having an emotional response, and the means by which others are aware that this is occurring. It is in some ways
the content of the play up to that moment was not edited, but did the technique involve orienting the future content in a specific direction?
That is not at all.
Even this was
not my perception. I mean, I don't have the text in front of me now. I have an old version, but my impression was not. Now I could be wrong about that, but my impression was not. The point was the social and psychological experience of continuing through this. And I perceived it as shall we call it tough love? But that's sort of become a sarcastic mean. That's not quite what I mean. I think sort of the original meaning of tough love, that we're not going to sand off any corners here. We're not going to make it easier. We are, however, going to do this in a way that respects your experience of it. So that's my impression of what I understand about the game. I don't know if there are fiction editing or fiction directing elements, but that's not what I recall, either from play or from the text as I have seen.
You played with Stefano, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's good to know.
Yeah. I mean, I would double check. I mean, the game has obviously been through some changes and things, but since I played, but this was back in development. But I'm pretty
I didn't see anything.
Stefano, I would be surprised if softening the content were part of that picture. I would be surprised.
No. I don't think that. I don't think Stefano had in mind anything like that. I went to the source, which I will post in the chat now, which was a link by PH Lee of 2017, and in that text, it was a blog post. In that text, there was something that went in a quite different direction. It literally said that as a part of that, the player is given the player with triggered with used the tunnel mechanics is given absolute fiat power over the triggering material. For instance, I need this to have a happy ending, or I need the character not to get away with this, or something like this. Which nothing of this was imported into Stefano. No, nothing of this was imported into Stefano's work.
Okay. So now I know that you're talking about a different source, and that this is PH Lee saying what they think would be the implication of the real world Luxton technique. And that's all it is. So no play example, I have one word: bullshit. It's somebody opining on the internet about a thing that might happen to a thing that didn't happen. I don't care.
Okay, fine.
Just to add something, this is the commonly, so usually there's these kind of pamphlets that are given out.
Sorry, I also know that particular author extremely well. and I have my own take on the authenticity of their statements. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because maybe that didn't come across in what Lorenzo was saying, but there's essentially these commonly distributed like pamphlets or sets of safety tools, and the Luxton technique is on the list and usually refers to this post by PH Lee. So the implementation that is commonly distributed, which is not what Stefano has in Stonewall, is this what Lorenzo just said, which is if you're triggered, you take complete fiat control. Just want to clarify.
Right,
Okay.
right. Well, that's my statement about
Okay, so I'm happy that we clarified that. Good. Okay, I'm fine. So if you have anything to add, you're welcome. Otherwise, thank you
I don't think
very
so.
much.
Only that I'm glad that we've kind of walked through these, and the more conversations about this stuff, the better. But more importantly, the more attention to play and what we actually do in it, the better. I mean, the more we enjoy play and say, well, what did we do? Was there kind of a glance around the table and then something got veiled? Or did somebody say a specific, term and say, oh, veil that or whatever, and it happened? Or any of those other things, maybe if there are different sorts of cards now, if it was in operation, and maybe it's a functional technique and not a crude and ineffective one. Well, good, right? We continued to play, and things operated, and the fiction arguably was better, not only as fiction, but just as our experience of it. Okay, all to the better. But the point is that what I just said can apply both with editing things down and opening them up, because also in play, there are times when someone says, yeah, I'm not veiling this, and continues to play. Or doesn't say that, but goes ahead in a very unveiled, maybe I'm on a line kind of way, and then we find out. And often you will be surprised at how much people are good with, not because they're sitting there suffering and triggered and silenced, but because they are, in fact, good with this, which is something that the people who first started promulgating stuff, especially with the X card, they could not conceive of any such thing. They could not conceive of any such thing as people enjoying expanding their range into all sorts of content. That's not something that to them, no. Play is fragile. It'll be hurt. It'll be broken. People will be hurt. People will be broken. So,
okay.
So when I talk about lines and veils, we may actually be talking about expanding rather than contracting. And that applies to many of the other techniques we're talking about. And if you do go to Stefano and Stonewall 69, you will see that he is all about the expansion of the experience and the content. So that is my take.
Wonderful.
Lorenzo, I'm tired.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Lorenzo.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
See you